All right, I think we got most everybody here, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll call this special board meeting in order. It is 5 o'clock on October 6th. I can't believe it's October 6th. That's crazy. My name is Sean Eystone. I want to welcome everybody that's listening and everybody that's on my screen. We have Directors Clausen, Eastham, Etsy, Godwin, Malone, and Williams. Interim Superintendent Degner, Recording Secretary Kim Colvin, and a whole host of other folks on here. We have really just one item on our agenda tonight. So it's our Return to Learn update, a week and a half into hybrid, give or take. So I will turn it on over to Matt and the team.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. We hope to be relatively brief here for you this evening, if not very brief, depending on questions you have. But like Sean said, we're a week and a half into hybrid, and we think, obviously, just like we started with online learning, things are going well, but we're also learning a lot as we go through on our way through, and met with our administrative council this afternoon and had some good conversations about questions that continue to pop up. A couple high-level things I just wanted to, I think, point out and remind people. I think the board is well aware of our COVID dashboard that we have on the district website that tracks our current students that would be positive and our positivity percentage that's listed there. Same for staff. And then as well, we have the Johnson County 14-day rolling positivity rate that we're tracking on there as well. And so that's a quick reference point for people that may not be accessing that site, or if you haven't been to it yet, that is on our district webpage there in the COVID-19 section of the site. The other thing, just wanted to take a minute to remind everyone of our COVID metrics and matrix that was passed by the board, recommended by the admin team, that includes the different percentages for when we would transition models, and a reminder that we'd consider transition to a fully on-site model at only the trimester. And so we know we've been getting some questions around that, and some concern about just as we started hybrid, when we could consider doing something additional. And I think there's a couple things that we want to be cognizant of there, that the positivity rates look good now, but we want to see some prolonged good-looking positivity rates before we would make any kind of a switch or decision to do something different along those ends. And we know that can change quickly on us, as we've seen with our positivity rates here over the summer and early in the fall. The other component of that is the health and safety mitigation efforts that we're able to employ in the hybrid model would drastically be reduced in a 5-day, everyday experience. And so those were a couple of things that led into bringing that to you guys when we had that conversation. And so I just wanted to refresh that and remind folks of when that transition point would be considered. So those were two kind of just items that we've talked about before, but wanted to open up and make sure that we touched on this evening as well. The other kind of three components that we have for this evening, we're going to provide a technology update, an update on the quarantine protocols, as we saw the governor change some direction on quarantining and when folks would need to quarantine. And so we gave that to our health and safety committee, and they came back with a recommendation that we wanted to update you guys on this evening. And then finally, we have a early retirement component that Chase and the team would like to talk to you about here tonight as well. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Chase, I think, first here with the quarantine protocols, and then he can turn it over to Adam at that point for the technology update. Sure. And I'm sure he'll lean on. Sorry, I'll just let you go, Chase. Go ahead.
All right. I talked over the top of you, but good evening. Nice to see everybody again. And as Matt said, we want to give a quick update on any changes or the proposed changes that the governor put out last week about students quarantining. If you caught her press conference, really the short version is that the governor and the Iowa Department of Health came out with revisions that if students were wearing masks when they came in close contact with another student or an adult that was wearing a mask, that quarantining was not required. The governor started her press conference by saying something to the effect of, this is not in line with the CDC guidelines, and also said this is just an option for school districts and not required. And so, as Matt said, we give to Kate and Dwayne and our Health and Safety Committee, which includes members from Johnson County Public Health, as well as some area medical professionals. And out of the Health and Safety Committee came the recommendation that we maintain our current protocols and follow the CDC practices. And Matt and Amy and I agree that that is the best approach. And so while the governor did give that option to school districts, and some are taking advantage of that, we believe what's best for our schools and our community is that we continue to follow the guidance from the CDC along with Johnson County Public Health, and that the procedures we put out earlier this year before we came into hybrid and even earlier in August will remain in place. Kate, anything you want to add to that about that decision process? Okay. Want to make sure that we don't skip over any questions. I know we kind of went through everything last time and maybe some questions got missed. So we do want to pause after each item to see if there's any questions from the board about this quarantine piece.
Chase or Kate, can you just elaborate a little bit about the thinking of the Health and Safety Committee and advising maintaining our current practices?
Sure, I'm happy. Yep, sure, I'm happy to answer that. When we were discussing this, we worked with Johnson County Public Health, and they said they would certainly support the district with either decision that we would make. The teachers union supported staying with the current model. As we looked at the information that we had in front of us, we realized that the model we currently have is consistent with the district health and safety guidelines, really utilizing the CDC as our primary resource for guidance, and the committee really believes the primary source of guidance should be the CDC. And as we thought through this, we did consult with a local epidemiologist, pediatrician, nurses, Department of Public Health as well. We looked at the change in quarantine guidance as relatively new and based on information from districts really that are smaller than the Iowa City School District. And when we thought about that, looking at that research, it really reminded us of the research we first received on face shields, where for a while we thought maybe it is safer to use a face shield. And then a month later, we found out, no, the CDC is saying the face shield with a mask is safe, but not alone. So we just want to make sure we're always utilizing the most current supported research that we have and the best guidance. We did think that that the committee would want to review this decision after 30 days and maybe reevaluate it at that time as we move forward into the school year.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing I would add to that, and I don't know if anyone saw it over the weekend, actually I think it was just yesterday, so Monday, the CDC came out with some additional information about the potential airborne nature of COVID-19 and how it can be transmitted. And so I think that our staying with our past guidance in light of that is also a smart move. The CDC did not change in their guidance. They still recommend 6 feet of social distancing, wearing a mask, and hand washing, which are some of the 3 primary things that we are on board with too. So I think Kate pointing out that change of course earlier in the spring is good thinking through by the committee too, especially in light of that new information the CDC shared just yesterday. And thanks as always to Brady for his and his folks' contribution to those conversations as well. Other questions before I turn it over to Adam for a tech update?
I just have a quick question. And hopefully this is the right part of that section. And just looking at the COVID dashboard and just watching the numbers, I know that right now we have 5 staff who are currently COVID positive. And I'm just curious, that number, while that number is low, including the 11 that's currently quarantining, are we having any trouble with finding substitutes for those teachers, or just trying to figure out how we're doing there? Because I know in years past, when we're not dealing with COVID, we deal with some buildings struggling to find subs. How are we doing there?
Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I didn't. I was going to let you go, but I can hop in. Yeah, we're doing okay, Ruthina. I think we tried to plan ahead of time for some of these things. And I think in some situations, and I think Chase probably would have mentioned this, we've allowed for, depending on the circumstances, in some cases, people are able to continue teaching while they're in quarantine, and we just kind of find a way to work around that or provide some supervision in the classroom or do some different things there. So a lot of times we do feel like having that teacher continue, if at all possible, for those 10 days, that's better than some of the other options. So we work on those in a case-by-case situation. Obviously, if someone's ill and they're unable to teach, we don't want them doing that. So we're going to work and find a sub and work through that. We are still having some challenges with substitutes, so we're constantly trying to get more people on board. I know our team is trying to get some more folks on board before we get to typical sickness, but we've also found to start the year, at least, we've had probably less teachers taking absences than a typical year as well. So we're hoping to keep working in that positive direction and work with the team when we have these situations. But right now we're feeling pretty decent where we're at in regards to finding substitutes for our teachers.
Nick, and thank you for that. Just a quick question. Are you guys doing anything different this year in trying to find subs since the requirements changed? I'm just curious if, you know, when you say you're working on it, can you just talk a little bit more on what exactly you're doing, if it's something different?
It's not necessarily different. It's just there's more people eligible to be involved. I think the sub authorization has allowed more people to fill positions that are a little bit longer. Previously, if they had a sub authorization, they're not able to do a long-term placement. That's still something we're very careful with, because obviously those people do not have the same training or experiences that a licensed teacher may have. So we do work through that carefully. But the things that we probably did most differently this year, Ruthina, is we brought on more building subs than we have in years past, kind of in preparation for that. We have a higher allocation in our buildings, so that way we can get those people prepared and they can step in. So our day-to-day sub rates have probably been down a little bit because those individuals are able to step in and do a great job for us right away. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. But we have seen a recent uptick in people wanting to be involved in sub, and then we just need to get them in and oriented.
One thing I would add there, Nick, too, is we have put a pause on professional leave that would require a sub. So if someone was going to attend a conference that required a sub, we've asked them to just wait on that for the first trimester, just until we see if we have enough subs that we can cover that as well.
Great, thank you both.
And Chase, I have some questions and observations about the student active COVID case numbers too. Do you want to talk about that here or wait till another?
Matt, is that okay? Or we come back?
Yeah, I think that's a good time, Charlie. I mean, I didn't really pause for questions after that first couple pieces. And so I think we wanted to get those protocol component out, but now would be a good time to ask any questions you have there, you bet.
Okay, thanks. So the student active COVID case numbers, today I think it's 15. To my observation, since we started hybrid schooling with the students in the buildings, that number has varied between around 10 to 19 or so. My recollection is that before we were doing any having any students in buildings, that number was in the 6 to 7 range. So I've discussed this with Matt before. I'm not surprising anyone, I don't think, anyway, with these questions. So my thinking is that I wonder if the before hybrid part of this this school year, if our baseline number of active COVID cases among students was, say, in the 6 to 7 range, if the number that it appears to be since we started hybrid schooling, if that indicates some kind of within student population spread. And I think I'm not claiming that that's the case now. I'm at this point just wanting to make the, at least to my thinking, want to make the observation that the number of cases does seem to have increased, and we need to at least be very aware of that on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis as we go forward here. There are obviously there are reasons that number may have gone up that are not necessarily indicative of within the student population spread. But I think it's that number may also be indicating that there is some kind of spread. So that's my observation. And Matt, I think you may have some things that you're looking at too.
Yeah, I think a couple things, and then I'll ask anybody else to jump in that would like to too. But you know, Charlie, when we discussed it before, I think a little bit of it is us with students in the building becoming more aware and having more information and probably better knowledge of actual confirmed cases that we may not have in an online environment when they weren't coming into our buildings. I think as far as the question around the spread, we do track this by building. And so if we were to have that concern, we know that it's not always a whole district. We would be looking to move if we got into a situation where we did feel like there was a spread, that sometimes if we had to take an extreme measure around a campus or a classroom, we could also do that. And, you know, just like we've done with athletic teams in the summer when we had to pull down teams to prevent that. And I think some of that's not always because the spread has happened. That's also a preventative measure, and that's to make sure that we don't get into a situation where we have spread going on that could put us in a much worse situation. And so that's where we talk about, do we have an effective management strategy that when we do get a confirmed case? And I think we have done that, and we've had positive cases, and we've quarantined appropriate individuals to try to prevent and head some of those things off. But as far as the numbers increasing, like you said, it's kind of a range and has went back and forth between those numbers you talked about, between the 10 and the 19. And so sitting at 15, I don't think we've necessarily could probably say that's an increase because of being in hybrid, but I think it's probably some knowledge or data in there. But I also don't think, I think your point is a good one, Charlie, because I don't think I'd agree that we're not going to be ignorant to the fact that bringing people on campus and having them intermix with each other, there is the potential for that to occur, and that there is the potential for increased spread. And that's why obviously we've been very hesitant as a district to put kids in buildings and teachers in buildings. And but as we go along, I think we have an effective process to handle that and deal with it. So Chase, I know you're unmuted there too. So anything you wanted to add in on that before?
Yeah, just a couple of things, and I agree with Matt, Charlie. I think the point is well taken, and beyond us moving back into hybrid, we also know that the governor is in the process of lifting some restrictions in our county, which is going to potentially increase some things in the broader community. I think the good news for us is while we have had some students that have had positive tests or that we've put into quarantine, we are at this point not aware of any spread inside any of our schools. Now, we have had a couple of students that have shown up, and the nurses have checked them out upon arrival, and we've sent them home, or the teacher has sent them to the nurse's office because they've had a couple of symptoms, which is why we have the protocols in place. And I think that's to Matt's point, and Charlie, your point is we wouldn't see those kids when we're 100% online, but because we are in the hybrid and they're coming to the building, we are then putting our protocols in place. But we do need to be vigilant. We have been happy with the way the protocols have been utilized. We were talking earlier this week that we had a staff member at one of our buildings that did test positive, and that they were in the building while they were contagious. And through our contact tracing, we learned that there were 0 students that were in close contact. And we saw that as a very good thing, which meant that building, that teacher, those students were all following the protocols, wearing masks, using social distancing practices. And so while we know there is a risk with bringing students back, we think that's a positive indication that our teachers and our students are all following the protocols, taking it seriously, and making sure that we abide by those things to hopefully keep the spread as low as possible if we were to have some cases in our schools.
Other questions you're thinking about, or Charlie, anything come to mind after we tried to answer that there for you, or other members have questions on maybe those first few, the metrics, the dashboard, or the protocols?
I'm just very pleased that you and the staff put together the dashboard and have these numbers in front of us. So if something is happening that we need to be aware of, take some action on, we have the data that we can reference.
Great. Do we want to move to technology then with Adam? If you could give us a little overview, Adam, and kind of a status update.
Absolutely. So I'll start with home internet, similar update to what I've had the last few meetings. At this point, we've received just under 1,200 requests for home internet service. At this point, we've connected about 700 homes with either cable or fiber, and distributed 686 hotspots, which is up pretty substantially from the last meeting. We've continued to order and distribute hotspots in order to keep up with the demand that does keep coming in. We received a shipment last week, immediately allocated all of them, unfortunately, or fortunately. But we do have another shipment that's expected to arrive within the week to cover all of the outstanding requests we have, plus a cushion. So we continue to try to keep in front of that, or keep up with that, and get in front of it to whatever extent we can. We are starting to receive hotspots back from families whose homes have been connected since the school year started with cable or fiber, and we reallocate those as soon as we get them. So really try to turn them around so they're not sitting at the ESC any longer than they have to. Quick update about usage. Our limit, as I've mentioned, for the Khajiit hotspots that make up the vast majority of our hotspot allocation is 25 gigabytes per month. Average monthly consumption across all of our hotspots has been about 3.3 gigabytes since the start per month since the start of the school year. And only 4 out of our hotspots, about 1%, have hit a monthly limit this school year. That said, we are looking at opportunities to increase data limits as we scale down eventually, once we get more and more homes connected, scale down the number of concurrently deployed hotspots. We'll be able to adjust the monthly limits up so that we run into fewer problems. We do try to work with individual limit issues as we can, although as I've mentioned before, our Sprint hotspots through the grant program, we have no ability to control those limits. So again, as we start to get more homes connected and we build up a bit of a reserve of hotspots to meet the initial demand, we hope to redeploy some of those Khajiit hotspots that we have better control over to some students who currently have the Sprint hotspots, so that we can again provide them with that higher limit that'll serve them well. We're also looking at supplemental plans with some alternative carriers to address areas where connectivity with our existing hotspots is limited. So right now our Khajiit hotspots use the Verizon network, which is a very strong network in our region. The Sprint hotspots, which are Sprint T-Mobile, use the Sprint network. And so we're looking at bringing on some hotspots with other carriers. So if we have students in particular areas that are having trouble, we can try to address that by swapping with a hotspot for another carrier, whether it's something like US Cellular or AT&T, to see if they get better coverage with that. So we're really trying to troubleshoot these, and it gets down to that individual case basis to a pretty significant degree. We're also looking at, again, once we can start to get in front of this hotspot deployment issue a little bit, deploying more hotspots in cases where multiple students are in a household that can't be served by cable or fiber. You know, one of the big reasons that we view direct service to the home with cable or fiber as ideal is that we don't run into data cap limits. It's far easier to share amongst a household, just as most families do with a direct connection to the household that's then shared through wireless access points or an access point within the home. That's our ideal, is to get families connected direct to the home, and we'll do that in every case we can. In those cases where we can't, that's where we'll really look at deploying multiple hotspots to try to meet the demand for multiple students. Multiple devices can connect to any of our hotspots simultaneously. However, especially if you're in an area that doesn't have a strong 4G LTE signal to begin with, trying to productively use multiple devices on a single hotspot is a challenge. So we do continue to try to work through those. Quick update about our support requests. The help desk has received about 45% of our normal annual request volume during the first month of this school year. So this has been by far the busiest month in our history, and it's by a factor of probably 4. We are at 350 open requests as of this morning. That's down from 850 at the last update I gave you. We receive about 150 requests per day over the past week. That's down from 350 2 weeks ago. So we're seeing those requests decline in volume, which is expected. We see that at the start of every year. And our support response times for new requests are now normal, which is generally within 24 hours, and we have the ability to actively prioritize. That's something that was really compromised when we had, triple digit or quadruple digit open request volumes. But now that we're down at a more reasonable level, a lot of those 350 open requests are more complicated requests that we continue to work on. But we're able to get to other requests in the meantime. So that's been a positive change. We do continue to leverage some temporary staffing as we finish addressing some of those more complex outstanding tickets. We expect to wind down temporary staffing by Monday of next week and be back to our normal staffing level. We think that'll be sustainable. We have been troubleshooting. I know it's been asked about, so I wanted to address it. We've been troubleshooting reported issues with Chromebooks and Zoom, even down to having our technicians sit in on online classes to see exactly what the experience is for students and teachers, and try to, again, troubleshoot down to that individual level and figure out what the root cause of an issue is for any individual student or teacher. However, excuse me, Zoom did issue a Chrome OS client update at the end of September that in its release notes was specifically focused on improved performance for Chromebooks with low power processors, which includes our older Chromebooks in particular. We don't yet have enough data to know what effect, if any, that update has had, but it has been deployed throughout the district. So assuming that those release notes are correct, we do expect to see some improvement in Zoom performance on the Chromebooks based upon that update. The other advantage to that update is that the way they work to address some of the issues is by limiting things like frame rates, which might also have a positive impact in terms of the amount of bandwidth that a Zoom meeting consumes. So if a student's operating on a low bandwidth connection, or if data limits are a concern, this update is actually likely to decrease that bandwidth consumption, make it a little bit more reliable on any internet connection, and then also make it eat up a little bit less data. So that's my quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer this or if Chase or Matt. I'm just curious. I like to hear the number of families that you're trying to get fiber or cable, to the house. I'm just wondering, where is that? How is that cost being absorbed? Is that coming from special COVID dollars or other funds?
Yep, so I can speak to that. It's really coming, and Les may want to jump in as well. It's really coming from 2 funding sources primarily. One is CARES, which this is an allowable expense for that. And that's where it was originally budgeted. And since then, the state allocated federal dollars on a district by district basis. And we received an allocation that was specifically focused on connectivity. That's another area. I think that we actually billed part of our Chromebook purchase at the start of the year to that, but that grouped with the CARES budgeted dollars are really the area where we're funding this. I don't know if Leslie, if you want to speak to that any further.
Adam is exactly correct. We received an additional $260,000 for specific technology needs. We did allocate most of that directly to Chromebooks because it was easier to take one transaction than a bunch of small ones to do that from an accounting perspective. And the rest is funded by the other CARES dollars allocation that we've shared with you since April.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would just think that, getting access directly to the house is going to be a much more long-term solution than a hotspot would be. So I appreciate all that work.
I do have a question, Adam. I don't think that I don't know who is going to answer the question, but so if students are having issues connecting and there's a gap in the time when, a request has been sent and it's being worked on, what happens in terms of them catching up with their schoolwork? Are there resources, like what do they do in the meantime?
Sure, maybe somebody from the teach and learning team would like to take that, Scott or Diane or even Amy, if you guys wanted to jump in about kids that have had connectivity issues, I think is what Dromy's asking. And then while they're trying to get the technology issues sorted out, or a Zoom issue, how are we keeping them moving in their coursework?
Yeah, so I'll take that for a little bit, and anybody else can jump in. I would say that we are honed in on student engagement, and that's, like I shared last board meeting, been a real big focus for us to make sure that our students are gaining access and that we're helping to eliminate those barriers. So as students are discovered, we've got multiple ways to look at that. We can see if there's inactivity in our Canvas or our Seesaw accounts. We can look at student attendance. And then our buildings are using their MTSS procedures to help support the students that way. And of course, part of that would be helping to get caught up with homework. Not sure that that's always happening, but that is a strong focus for us right now.
Thanks, Amy. As long as they're catching up, that's all that matters to me. So thank you.
Adam or Matt, or both of you maybe, I think you're doing a very commendable job in continuing to work on connectivity for each student. We did. I do need to note though that we received correspondence lately that ask a number of questions about what we're doing to make sure that we're not overlooking connectivity issues for students of color, Latinx students, and whether or not we could have done more during the summer or over the course of last spring to anticipate the issues that are arising and address them in a timely way. So I'm not suggesting that that is the case. I'm simply asking if there's a way we could respond to that concern from community members. And we may have learned things over the last several months, that we can apply in the future if we have similar situations arise. So Matt or Adam, I don't know if you can address that or not now, but.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point, Charlie. And I do think it is something we tried to anticipate and we tried to work on with communication and continuing to provide information on how families could gain access from the time we went on quarantine in March all the way through what we're continuing to do now and have those requests open. So I think that's something we've repeatedly tried to communicate out, but we still know that this virus has affected our structurally disadvantaged groups in multiple ways. And so I think that is something we have to continue to focus on. We have to continue to communicate with. And so, I'm familiar with the concern that you're bringing up and trying to continue our outreach and our efforts to make sure they have all of the best information and that families understand how to navigate our systems and structures to get that access. I think is something critical for us that we just have to continue to do and to work on. I think you had another point there too, Charlie, around what we're doing to continue to mitigate the concern. I think Adam talked about his efforts there from the technology team to try to deploy that access wherever we can and as quick as we can. But I think the other point to remember is what Amy just talked about too, that when we know people aren't engaging, then that prompts those questions. Is it an access issue? Is it a different issue that's preventing them from participating, and really trying to hone in on what the barrier is and what we can do as a system and as a district to try to remove that barrier. So I think it's twofold. We tried to be proactive and tried to communicate out around how we could get access, knowing that not all families would receive that information the same way. And then now that we've been engaged in learning, trying to address where we still have some holes or some gaps where students or families aren't connecting with us, and trying to do some really pointed outreach in that. And so we're not done by any means. And I think that's your kind of your point too, Charlie, is that it's just got to be sustained and we have to continue it. And we don't know what this pandemic is going to continue to throw our way. And so that's why it's important that we continue to sort those out. So that'd be my best answer to it. I don't know if anybody on the team would like to add any more to that, but I think that gives a pretty good lay of the land of where we're at, Charlie.
Thanks very much for your consideration here.
And our actual last item, and of course we can continue to take questions as you guys think about it if you want to come back to something, but our last item for tonight was around an early retirement piece. And I think Chase is probably going to turn it over to some members of his team, but I'll swing it to him here.
Sure. And actually, I think I'll just run through it and then have Les and Nick help me with some questions. Normally, this is something that we would bring to the board to give you a heads up on in November, that we were gearing up for our early retirement offering to our staff. It's something that we do contractually through our negotiated agreement every year. But credit to Nick for this idea that we're actually going to have two offerings this year, or two opportunities for staff to take advantage of our early retirement package. And we're calling the first one kind of our COVID caveat. One of the things that we heard from some of our staff that decided not to take the early retirement package last spring after the deadline had passed, after we got into the summer, was, man, have I only known, I would have gone ahead and taken early retirement. And so we're going to give our employees that meet the requirements for our early retirement package, which is to be IPERS eligible and 55 years of age, an opportunity to take early retirement at winter break as a way for them, just another option to consider as we all look at where we are in our personal lives and professional lives related to COVID. We feel this is one more avenue of opportunity that we can provide for employees to consider. And so we're going to put our early retirement offering out earlier this year, and we're sharing with the board tonight because we're going to start sharing information with our staff next week, and then make the applications available on October 20th. And then for those that want to take the early retirement at the winter break, those applications would be due back to HR by November 20th, so right before the Thanksgiving break. For individuals that are interested in early retirement, but will continue to work through the course of the entire year, the applications would be due at the end of January, like normal. We won't get into a lot of the details because we'll get all that information out, and so I won't kind of get bogged down on those timelines. But a couple of the important pieces that we do want to share with the board is that we will have a one-time lump sum payment. We haven't come up with that exact percentage of an employee's annual income of what that will be, but that'll be available no matter if employees decide to retire at winter break or at the end of the year. But they'll be paid out in October, which is our normal procedure on that. But one of the pieces that we're going to add for those individuals that elect to retire at the winter break is that we're going to continue to offer them district health insurance through the end of their original contract term, through the end of June. Normally, one reason we make the retirement paperwork due so early in January is that it gives individuals time to plan. But now that we're in the middle of October, and that the end of December quickly approaching for some folks, we think it's good to allow them that additional 6 months as they may have originally planned to do. And so individuals that take advantage of the COVID caveat for early retirement will be finished working at the end of December, but will have their benefits extended through the end of June. And for those that would elect to retire at the end of the school year, of course, their benefits would continue as well. So it's a little bit of a different take this year. Again, another extra avenue of support that we feel like we can offer to folks that might be considering their options as we all, confront COVID and what it means for us both professionally and personally. Nick or Les, anything to add to that overview of the program as we sit today?
I would just add that it will be funded in the same way that the regular plan is, and that is through the management fund. And so that is why the incentive will not be paid until October, which is next year, because this year's management fund levy has already been set. So those funds are not available out of the current year. So it will look and feel just like our regular offering. We're just providing what we're calling that COVID caveat about 2 months earlier than normal, to allow these people to have that opportunity for themselves.
Yeah, I would just add, actually, I feel really good about doing this and the way of taking care of our people, as Chase alluded to. I mean, for some folks, they've really been making some tough decisions, both personally and professionally. And this just gives one more avenue for folks who have had to make some tough choices, and they feel like, they're, maybe letting down some teammates, and they want to have a good option or a possibility for themselves. So we're excited that we're able to consider this for some of these individuals who have dedicated a lot of time and effort to the district. So we think it's a nice piece for our employees to be able to take advantage of this.
This is Brady. I would echo what Nick just said, and Chase and Les, and also thank them and their teams. This is for some of our employees. This will be, and not just teachers, because it is for all employees. This will be a really, I think, a way for them to have a sort of a dignified approach and retirement with the district. So and I know that districts don't have to do the insurance part to continue that on, and that really, for a lot of our people, that's a really big factor in their decision making. So I'm very appreciative, and I know employees are too, that the benefits would continue if they took the early retirement, the COVID caveat, mid-year retirement, that those would continue. So just thanks to everybody for that consideration. I think that'll mean a lot to some of our people.
Do you think that number is relatively modest, and do we feel pretty good about being able to hire folks at that time to replace them?
Yes, we know the number of people that are eligible, JP, and we also know how many folks took it last year and the year before. And if you remember, 2 years ago, we offered 100% and insurance. And so kind of using that as our barometer, we have a pretty good feel of where the numbers are. Also, Waukee did this as well, although they made, Les, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they made people tell the district in September whether or not they wanted to do this. And so a lot earlier than we are, and their numbers were in the single digits. We think we'll probably have more folks than that, but given that data, given the data from other districts, we think we have a pretty good sense of where that number might end up. And that's one reason we want the applications in before the Thanksgiving break, because it allows Nick and the team to get a job fair advertised and out there. And I mean, that makes us really competitive for December graduates. We're not going to go out to December graduates and say, hey, sign on to be a long-term sub. I mean, we're going to give them an opportunity to start teaching in the classroom in January, which we think will give us a competitive advantage at those job fairs as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that, JP. We had a really nice experience last year. We hired some teachers partway through the year and had great returns, found some really great candidates. We're helping us achieve some of our hiring goals. So actually being one of the few districts that's out hiring in the winter months is actually a pretty advantageous position to be in. So this has got a double benefit, actually. I mean, I think we're helping out people along with putting ourselves. Now, do I have a little bit of a concern that we'll have like a really obscure, someone with a really obscure licensure in one of our classrooms take that, and then we have to find, that could be a little, I won't say that it's all roses and sunshine or whatever, but hopefully that won't be the situation. But we do feel pretty confident in our ability to get folks on board and replace people. And also looking at it from the, not just the teaching side, but we've been talking about our physical plant and our nutrition services and how we're going to approach making sure that we don't want them to be shorthanded. I mean, we know the great work that they've been doing. The last thing we want them to do is feel like they're shorthanded as well. So having some ways that we can help them kind of proactively be looking for folks, and even probably having some postings up before we even know what's exactly open, so we can be proactive in how we try to approach this.
So Sean, that kind of, thank you guys. Well, I should say thank you first for walking the board and the community here through that retirement piece. I think that is a good support measure for our employees in a really difficult situation. And so thankful to the group for bringing that forward and having that concept for us to talk through, because people that have, provided such a great service to the district deserve that definitely. And like Nick said, I think there's a twofold benefit there, but the most important reason for obviously doing it is to make sure that those people have like Brady talked about, a dignified way to be able to go in this really tragic and difficult situation. So with that though, those were our items for our update tonight. Told you we'd keep it brief, and that is the conclusion of our components. And so if you guys had questions or other things that were on your mind around return to learn, we definitely would take those or answer those. But that was our run of topics for this evening.
And I have a quick question that's not any of those topics. It's very specific to this Friday not being school. Can we speak to a little bit about how we're going to do meals? Allison, maybe?
So, Halcyon, okay, do you want me to go? So yeah, sorry, Sean, the short of it is that we're not offering meals on Friday, and that's been kind of consistent in our communication that once the school year started, that in school meals and grab and go meals would be offered on the days that we normally have school. And so there is not grab and go meals this Friday.
Part of that goes back to our agreement with the Department of Ed. We have to apply for these meals, and we don't apply for non-school days. I'm not even sure that's an option available to us.
So that is a little different than I had talked to some of you about independently prior in the week. But like Allison said, I think it's really rooted in the concern around being able to apply for those meals on the days we have school. And so that was something as the team talked about it throughout the week that we just weren't able to pull off for Friday. So I apologize for any of those that I talked to you about that we said maybe we'd be able to do something different there. So good question, Sean.
Although since we are talking about meals, not that you asked for an update, but we've been very pleased. The grab and go numbers are down a bit. Allison shared with us that we're averaging about 1,800 still a day for grab and go, and about 2,700 meals served per day in our buildings. And we actually thought that number would be a bit higher. So just a quick reminder that through our waiver, meals are free for all students at the grab and go sites, but also inside the buildings. And so, I guess we did think that it's just the first week, so that number could go up a little bit, but Allison's team does a great job putting together not only nutritious meals that meet the federal guidelines, but they're also tasty too. And so we just want to remind families that meals are free both at the curb and also in the building on a daily basis.
So with that, Chase, is it possible for building administrators to do like a robocall? I don't know if they're still doing robocalls, like reminding families like this week there'll be 2 A days and 3 B days. Is it possible for them to slide that into whatever messages they're sending out, not a whole separate one, but tack that on to whatever messages they're sending out to families?
Sure, we can. I don't want to speak for Amy, Diane, and Scott, but I think that we can all work together to help have our principals reinforce that communication.
Thank you. If possible, like I said, if they're already doing messages, not a whole new one to add more work to their plate.
Yeah, we can work on that, Ruthina, sure. Yeah. Other questions, guys?
It's a really random question, I guess. We're kind of at that time frame of normal certified enrollment, early October here. Still blows my mind that it's October. Are we, I don't know, how are they counting that this year? How are we reporting numbers back to the state, and how are they getting stuff back to us, hopefully earlier than what happened last year?
Yeah, that would be the ideal. And so we're right now in the middle of the two important dates, October 1st and the 15th, of when we count, and then the certified component of that. And so once we have that information, then of course we'll get that right back to you guys. And I know we've had a couple media inquiries around that this week, and that's the same, obviously, information that we've been given. We're right in the middle of that now. And so to try to give you specific numbers, we don't have that today, but like you said, hopefully we have that much sooner than the kind of debacle we had last fall with that, and getting those numbers turned around. Not our debacle, I'll say, by the way.
I would just add that
We're not
there's
gonna,
also, sorry, Matt.
That's all right.
I would just add that there's also a special education count that happens after 10-1. And last year, just to link it all back together, there was an issue, Lisa Glenn helped me out, between IMS not working, and that was what helped create that delay for the total certified enrollment number, which I believe we didn't have until December last year, early December. So hopefully this year is much more typical, which is around November that we receive that information back.
Yeah, thanks for that. Any other directors have any other questions on return to learn topics? All right, looks like we are going to have an early night, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and
See you guys next week.
next week.
Thank you.
Bye.